There are several railroads built in New England that were never operated, but none more grand than the Southern New England. This 85-mile railroad would have provided access to the deepwater port of Providence, Rhode Island. Today, much remains if you know where to look. The Grand Trunk Railway was promoted by Canada's Grand Trunk Railway's chief executive, Charles Melville Hayes. It was Hayes' vision that sparked the last great railroad war in New England. His adversary was none other than the infamous Charles S. Mellon, who was the president of the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad. Mellon owned or controlled most of the railroads in New England, and he wasn't going to stand around and wait for someone to build a railroad in his backyard. Many say that Hayes' dream sank with the Titanic on that fateful night on April 15, 1912. But in reality, it was the financial part that did him in. In fact, construction of the railroad just started 3 weeks after he perished on the Titanic. While this adds drama, it doesn't tell the whole story. Construction on the SNE was broken into 2 phases. The first started just 3 weeks after the Titanic sank and continued for 6 months. Mellon and the New Haven Railroad did everything they could to stop the SNE from being built, and it was all this legal maneuvering that caused construction to stop. In fact, it got so bad that the governors of Rhode Island and Massachusetts put in a claim against the railroad for the Sherman Antitrust Act, and it was eventually the resolution of that allowed the construction to begin in earnest in its second phase. Construction resumed in October of 1913, but with the outbreak of World War I in 1914, cash again became the problem. And eventually construction halted for good in December of 1915. After World War I ended, there were attempts to revive construction of the railroad, but they were unsuccessful, and eventually the railroad was liquidated. In this video, we'll visit many of the reminders of the Southern New England Railroad between Webster and Palmer, Massachusetts. Come along with me and see what remains of the Southern New England Railroad. I think you'll be quite surprised.
Good morning, John Mrazek and my friend Tom Chase.
Good morning.
We're located right now and standing on the Boston and Albany East Webster branch. The real name of the railroad, the proper name, is the Providence Webster in Springfield. The B&A simply operated the branch. Behind me, perhaps about 20 yards, we're going to see bridge placements or footings where a 1,100-foot bridge crossed over the Boston and Albany, over the French River, and over the New Haven, Norwich, and Worcester branch.
This bridge footing is less overgrown in 2013.
That's it. That's the last pier remaining right there. That is it.
This is a similar angle from 2013 without the leaves. The former Boston and Albany trestle is still here today in 2022, and we can see where it would have crossed the French River and the New Haven Railroad just south of the SNE. This historic photo shows a New Haven Railroad southbound train passing underneath the built but never used SNE trestle.
We're at Cross Street in Dudley. If you notice the stonework behind me, you'll notice the width. As they were approaching the station on Main Street, Dudley, on the Dudley side, it was 2 tracks wide.
I carefully climbed the deteriorating west abutment. The build date here indicates 1914. Brandon Road is shown in close proximity to the American Woolen Company in this pre-construction blueprint.
We're in West Dudley, Massachusetts, standing on the SNE roadbed. To my immediate right is the West Dudley Mill area and the West Dudley Mill Dam. Also, on the opposite side, on the west side of the river, is the New Haven Railroad Southbridge branch. SNE would run on the east side of the river and the New Haven on the west. And this would take place all the way to Southbridge, with the Quinnebog dividing the two railroads. At Sandersdale and Southbridge, the two railroads would then join up and run very close to each other, going through the central Southbridge area.
This section of the video covers the SNE right-of-way for about a mile along the Quinnebog River. The New Haven Southbridge branch already claimed the west side, leaving the Grand Trunk to put their right-of-way in between the river and a ledge on this side of the river. If you follow the right-of-way for about a mile, it ends at M.L. Partlow & Son Paving on Dudley River Road. From there, I continued on the road to Sandersville and returned via the New Haven Railroad Southbridge branch, which is officially a rail trail in the town of Dudley. We are now heading east on a quarry access road in West Dudley. Portions of this road were constructed on the former SNE right-of-way. The SNE right-of-way passed through this quarry on the left-hand side where that opening is. I followed the right-of-way a bit further, but it is definitely overgrown and certainly not maintained as a trail. I eventually worked my way back to the New Haven Southbridge rail trail and followed that back to West Dudley in my car. This is the American Optical parking lot, and this is actually where the SNE was. The former American Optical plant is here, and this retaining wall on the left is where the New Haven Southbridge branch ran. Our first stop in Southbridge is Morris Street. Here we can see another bridge abutment with a 1914 construction date. Just a half a block further west we come to Pleasant Street in Southbridge. In this portion of the video, I am joined by my friend John Mrazek for a bike ride on the SNE between the Army Corps of Engineers Westville Dam and River Road in the Westville section of Southbridge. This is currently the longest and best maintained section of the former SNE right-of-way. To put things in perspective, I asked my friend John to stand on the right-of-way above the culvert. I think right here the Grand Trunk would have went across the river. Yeah. And we're going to cross over here on the bridge here pretty soon. So looking back, this is where the Grand Trunk would have crossed the river. The bridge they put in 2002 that we just crossed was a little bit easier to put in at a right angle to the river rather than crossing it at a diagonal like the Grand Trunk did. We are now exploring a new hiking area being developed in Sturbridge. This area has close to a mile of SNE right-of-way to explore between Old Sturbridge Village and Holland Road. There's a short stretch of the Grand Trunk here that's open as a rail trail here. It's located just across the street from Sturbridge Village, and it takes us up to the dam in Fiskdale. So the first part of the trail here, although it's crushed gravel, is obviously not on the railroad bed. There's a whole system of trails here. We may explore others later, but let's stick with the Grand Trunk Trail for now. Side here we can see off to our left is where the cut is heading back towards Sturbridge Village. And looking forward, we can see that the trail is actually going to join the railroad right away over here. We're actually walking on a large fill here just east of Fiskdale. And the trail is now outside of the railroad right away to the north of it. If you're interested in seeing the GPS track of my explorations for this video and others, remember to check the description down below for the All Trails link. Down there, maybe there was a dam here at one point, or a mill. All right, a mile and a half later, we pop out onto the road. Gonna head back now. Continuing west, we explore the area between Holland Road and the East Brimfield Dam. A small parking area off Holland Road allows access to the trolley trail that brings us to the dam itself. The Grand Trunk ran parallel to the trolley in this area, and we're going to explore a little of both. We've just walked about a quarter mile down the old trolley bed here in East Brimfield. And it brings us to the East Brimfield Dam. On the other side of that spillway is the Grand Trunk. Over here on the right is a bridge abutment for the trolley line going across the Quabog River here. We've come down to the riverbank, and that was the abutment we were just filming from. If we look downstream here at the Quabog River, we can see where the Grand Trunk would have crossed, maybe 50 feet downstream from the trolley bridge. So the spillway here has two levels. On the left, the higher ground is something they dug out for the dam. On the right, which has a slight curvature, is the actual Southern New England Railroad right away, which basically went to the same height as that spillway here. So we're just behind the spillway here at the East Brimfield Dam, and we are actually walking on the Grand Trunk right away. Off to our left is the trolley line, and we were previously across the river on that far abutment looking towards the dam. We are standing in the river looking up at the Grand Trunk right away. First we'll look west, and then we'll look east. You can see the spillway behind the drain. That is where the Grand Trunk came out, crossed the orange line, and went out that spit of land and continued along the shore for quite some time here at East Brimfield Lake. We'll explore this area more in a minute. For now, we'll check out the SNE east of the river as we return to the car. Behind me is the SNE grade just east of the Quabog River crossing. There doesn't appear to be any evidence of an abutment on either side here at the Quabog River, just east of the spillway. But you can see from this large cut that this railroad and the trolley line ran very close to each other in parallel in this area. Just over this hill is where they put the trolley. In this section, the southern New England would have crossed the Quabog River twice within less than a quarter of a mile. So we're at the far east end of this cut, and we're going out on a fill, and I can hear the river. It's getting fairly overgrown. I'm not going to be whacking through that to go check if there's any abutments, but right here on the other side of the river would be Holland Road.
A gated entrance off Streeter Road has on-street parking for one car and allows public access to this quarter-mile stretch of the S&E right-of-way west of the East Brimfield Dam.
Behind me is the East Brimfield Dam on the Quinnipiac River. We're actually standing on what is the Southern New England Railroad right-of-way. Of course, it's been filled in with the dam a little bit, but you can see where the overflow is actually where the Grand Trunk went through. So let's go check it out. This is the East Brimfield Dam, and we're standing in the overflow channel, which is actually the Southern New England Railroad's right away. Right here, this is where the Southern New England Railroad would have went through. Small spit of land here was once the fill of the Southern New England. It doesn't actually go all the way across, but it goes out quite a ways. So we're going to take it to the end and check it out.
Further west and off the East Brimfield-Holland Road, we can barely see the old trolley bridge abutments. Behind that, the S&E right-of-way. The right-of-way continues as a rail trail for another quarter-mile before reaching the Quinnipiac River. If they install a bridge, it would connect to the Grand Trunk Trail and 5 bridges. Next, we will explore the 5 bridges section of the Grand Trunk Trail. In this area, both the trolley and S&E right-of-ways are developed and used. More than half the developed trail in this area is not the S&E. Nonetheless, I do recommend checking it out.
You can see the trolley just running parallel to us here was almost reaching the bridge abutments over the Quabog River as we head east. It's like we've reached the end here. There's definitely some pilings here. I wonder if those are from the railroad, both here and on the other side. The S&E would have went straight across the Quabog here. We're standing on the trolley grade and we're looking east. The mode path appears to curve over to our right and probably rejoins the Grand Trunk. There's a short stretch of trail on the other side of the river that can be accessed from, I think it's the Holland Brimfield Road. I'll look it up. Standing in the river there looks to be a lone pylon, potentially from the Southern New England Railroad. That certainly is where it would have crossed. If you're interested in duplicating this walk, it's about a mile one way down to the bridge piers, regardless of whether you take the trolley line or the Southern New England trunk line.
We are at Mill Lane Road in Brimfield. Here temporary trestles were built and locomotives were used to move fill and raise the grade of the road to pass over the S&E. We are leaving the Quinnipiac River Valley and climbing the grade toward Fenton Mountain.
We're here on the Dedhamtown Brimfield Road. Over here on this side is a cut, and we're gonna go check out this side here. This stretch of right-of-way looks pretty open, and someplace under this high fill, probably a culvert. See if we can find it. This small box culvert sits at the bottom of the fill, just east of Dunhamtown Brimfield Road. And over here on our left looks like the right-of-way goes through a cut. Just west of the Brimfield Dunhamtown Road is this small cut, and while it's fairly overgrown, definitely seen worse. The next stop is at Dunhamtown Palmer Road. Behind me is a box culvert that the S&E installed across the Bottle Brook, and it's just south of Dunhamtown Road. Next, we'll explore the S&E's Horseshoe Curve. This would have been a massive curved trestle. We're standing off Boston Road, and here is the Mass Pike, Route 90, and in the woods here is the western abutment of the Southern New England Railroad. Here would have been the apex of the Horseshoe Curve where it crossed Boston Road. So we climbed up the hill a little bit. And of course there's a highway here, so there's a fence, but hopefully you can see the abutment over there. We're just east of the Mass Pike, and a short walk in the woods reveals some of the footings for the bridge that crossed the Quabog River. There are 4 footings here, 2 on this side, another one here, and that larger one that we just saw in plain view. As we're starting to head down the embankment, we can see the river, and I see another 4 footings as well. Last pair of footings on this side of the river. We're standing on Washington Road, just across the street from the address 118. And just in the woods between the road here and the Boston and Albany tracks are 2 footings for the trestle that crossed the Quabog River and the Boston and Albany. The homeowner told me his house is the one in this photo. It was moved to its present location directly in the path of the trestle. We're just walked into the woods a little bit here, and we can see one large pier here and the Boston Albany behind it. Right behind me here is the piers we saw in the Quabog River, and looking straight across the Boston Albany here at that large pier and Washington Road. Piers there, right?
Yeah, there's 2 piers there. There's a couple of smaller ones hidden by bush.
Footings, yeah. And then the abutment is straight in front of us, hidden by mostly by trees there. In this photo, we can make out the right-of-way halfway up the hillside. The photographer is standing in Palmer looking across the Quabog River Valley at Fenton Mountain in Brimfield. Next, we make a quick stop at Robinson Road. A small fill here at the intersection of Robinson Road and Boston Road indicates where the S&E ran. We find more evidence at Mason Street. We're standing here on a fill that is located just west of the crossing here at Mason Street. There is lots to see here in Blanchardville. Although this blueprint of the Central Massachusetts Power property in Blanchardville is dated August 1927, it still shows the Southern New England Railroad. To make it easier to see, I have marked the S&E in red, the B&A in green, and the trolley line in orange. We're standing in Palmer, Massachusetts, just off Blanchard Street. Behind me is a remaining pier for a bridge that once crossed the Quabog River here. It came across diagonally across the Quabog River, and shortly after this crossed over the Boston and Albany. What's really interesting at this location is we can see several of the piers are actually washed into the river here. If you look directly across the river and up the hillside, you can see where the right-of-way is flat to the right of the high tension line towers, and below in the river, a very interesting piece of cement was one of the bridge piers. We are looking at the easternmost abutment of the Southern New England Railroad, where it crossed the Boston and Albany.
This is the western abutment. Milepost marker 82 reveals the location of what would have been the S&E's first crossing of the B&A. This brings us to the beginning of the S&E, where it would have connected to the Central Vermont Railroad.
We're standing on the grade crossing here at Hospital Road in Munson, Mass, which is just south of the CV's Palmer Yard. Behind me, this stack of ties is where the Southern New England Railroad branched off and headed towards Providence. That's going to wrap it up for today's video. If you enjoyed it, please remember to like, share, subscribe. If you're interested in seeing more, check out the video I have on the Titanic Railroad in the Douglas State Forest of Massachusetts. Shout out to my friends Tom Chase and John Mrazek for their help in making this video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you're interested, check out some of my other videos.
This video on the S&E would not be complete without mentioning Larry Lowenthal's book, The Titanic Railroad. This book is out of print, but if you can find it and afford it, it's an invaluable resource.